Welcome to A Line Through Time, where I take the time to look through your favourite franchises and work out how it all lines up. Despite being not nearly as ubiquitous to Nintendo's typical lineup as Mario or Zelda, Metroid remains no less iconic and beloved in spite of being a massive Aliens ripoff. It's a shame the series doesn't get treated better by Nintendo though, because galactic bounty hunter Samus Aran is a way more interesting main character than Fat Plumber Mario, generic fantasy hero Link, or trainer of Pokemans. Metroid is a portmanteau of Metro and Android, in reference to its allegedly robotic main character exploring underground caverns. In truth, the protagonist is not an android, but a woman, a decision that was thrown in because the developers thought it would be cool and no one made a big deal of it until people realised she was sexy and threw a fit over alleged objectification. But why am I telling you all this? Is it to set the stage for the disappointments of the more recent titles? Is it to tell people who look at Samus as a woman first and a character second to fuck right off? Is it to pretend I know what I'm talking about when I've never played any of these games through to completion? To answer my question that I'm attributing to you, the original Metroid released in 1986 and established a new genre later popularised by Castlevania as Metroidvania. You know, like how Doom and Wolfenstein created the Doomenstein genre, or how Mario and Sonic popularised the Marionic genre. So dumb. The space pirates tried to use the Metroids as weapons to kill everyone who opposes them because pirates wanting galactic domination makes so much sense. Samus kills them all, defeats Mother Brain and takes her clothes off if you're a bad enough dude to save the galaxy. The sequel, Metroid 2 The Return of Samus, a redundant subtitle if ever there was one, released in November 91 for the Game Boy, because releasing a main numbered sequel to a console game on a portable system made sense back then, I guess. The story sees the Galactic Federation trying to wipe out the Metroids for good, but their teams die and they send Samus in, which you'd think they'd have done in the first place after she wiped out the last batch, but I guess you could argue the Federation have too much pride to bring Samus in until they need to. This will make a lot less sense as the timeline expands. Samus kills the Queen Metroid because, again, aliens, and while escaping Samus finds a baby, which imprints onto Samus so she takes it with her on her ship. In 1994, the series graced the Super NES with the highly creative title of Super Metroid. This game follows on directly with a plot setup that I think suggests a very different interpretation of Samus and baby's relationship than what we have now. Samus takes the baby to a space colony to be studied so its power can be harnessed. This suggests that Samus didn't actually feel a motherly bond with the baby, but instead saw it as an asset to be studied to further the annihilation of the Metroids. But the baby doesn't know that and still sacrifices itself to save Samus from Mother Brain, which could suggest a great deal of guilt in Samus after this for simply using a creature that saw her as its mother, rather than just feeling sad over losing her pet and turning into a whiny little bitch. Needless to say, it's a direct sequel set right after the last game. The 17th of November 2002 saw the release of two very different Metroid games simultaneously, Metroid Fusion and Metroid Prime. Let's cover Fusion first, since Prime will take a little more explaining than Fusion, I think. In Fusion, Samus investigates a new planet with Federation scientists and comes under attack by a parasitic organism that infects its host and creates a doppelganger of them while also killing the host because, you know, aliens. A vaccine is created using cells from the body of the baby, I guess, sure? And Samus is cured, but parts of her power suit are now merged with her body as the Fusion suit. And Samus works with her new ship's onboard computer, which she nicknames Adam after her old commanding officer, only it turns out the computer is actually a digital recreation of Adam's mind, and this is fucking stupid. The game acknowledges the death of the baby, setting it after Super Metroid. Fusion is very much the DMC2 or third strike of Metroid, as the series has continued for over a decade since, but has yet to actually move chronologically past this game, likely because the Fusion suit prevents Samus from stripping down to a Zero suit. Samus and Adam's backstory was later expanded on in the debatably canon manga the following year, before becoming the central premise of Other M. But I'll come back to that later. I don't want to, but I've unfortunately got no choice. Metroid Prime is a GameCube first-person shooter with Metroidvania exploration that expands on the lore of the Chozo race that raised and trained Samus, as well as the titular Metroid Prime. Said Metroid Prime, source of the hazardous material Phazon, absorbs Samus' Phazon suit and transforms into a new, completely unrelated doppelganger of Samus known as Dark Samus. There! Short, simple, not filled with contrived moronic bullshit. It's not hard, guys. Naturally, the one that made sense got a sequel 2 years later, Metroid Prime 2 Echoes. The entire Prime series is set between Metroid 1 and 2, making it the Alpha series of Metroid canon. The numbers for the Primes are also an indication of their order within that time span, so I don't need to explain where Prime 2 falls. Samus encounters Dark Samus and follows her through a portal to a dark alternate dimension based on a Link to the Past Dark World, a concept Nintendo refuses to stop using to this very day. Samus contends with a dark race called the Ing while also fighting Dark Samus and eventually destroying the dark version of the planet Aether, and Nintendo seems strangely obsessed with dark things. Make up your own joke, I'm not touching this one. Speaking of jokes, Metroid Prime Pinball is a retelling of the first Prime game but with pinball gameplay. It's obviously not canon, but it would be so great if it was. The next actual canon game was Metroid Prime Hunters for the DS in 2006. The game falls between Prime 1 and 2 and sees Samus sent by the Federation to find the ultimate power, but the transmission is intercepted by 6 other bounty hunters who all try to beat Samus to the site. It turns out there was an ancient civilization that was wiped out by some giant monster, and they turned into pure telepathic energy to seal the creature inside a seal sphere, inside a ship, inside the Infinity Void, and this has turned into a 70s Green Lantern plot. I'm beginning to question the validity of the conceit that this series has a good story. Metroid Prime 3 Corruption released in 2007 on the Wii and picks up 6 months after Echoes. Samus and a group of other bounty hunters become corrupted by Dark Samus, which for Samus just means she can harness the power of Phazon while everyone else turns evil. Samus defeats the other hunters and kills Dark Samus on the homeworld of the Phazon. 2010 saw the release of Metroid Other M, a title whose anagram is Mother and whose acronym is MOM. Because fucking subtle, am I right? The game follows on from Super Metroid, even opening with a partial recreation of the Mother Brain fight from that game. Not playable, mind, because that would be a cool idea. I'm not going to bother explaining the plot because it's genuinely retarded, but I will say the game depicts the supposed death of Adam alluded to in Fusion, definitively placing Other M between Super and Fusion. There's a lot wrong with the game's story, like a lot wrong with it, from Samus being an incompetent over-emotional shell, to Adam being a condescending dick to the woman who routinely kills Cthulhu monsters, to Samus freaking out over facing Ridley again despite having killed him 4 times since he killed her parents. To some people, Samus taking orders from a man is a problem, and if you're one of those people, then I'm afraid you're a sexist twat and I want you to leave. Click off this video right now, I don't want you here. But let's discuss what's most important here. Other M has a number of glaring continuity issues with previous titles. Perhaps the most significant is when Samus claims that
it was the first joint mission I'd been a part of since becoming a freelance bounty hunter.
Yeah, because that whole working alongside the Federation fleet thing was a bad dream, I guess. I've seen it suggested that Nintendo may have actually discreetly removed the Prime series from the timeline, and while I could see them doing something that stupid because this is the company who made this abomination, I don't think that's the case, partially because the Prime branding was used on a spin-off, which would be like Street Fighter getting a canonical EX spin-off despite that entire line being non-canon. I think it's just a standard continuity error, not a retcon. Still, retconning entries out isn't a bad idea, especially if that entry happens to be Other M. It's Metroid's 30th anniversary. Nintendo did 2 things to celebrate this significant milestone. They DMCA'd a fan remake of Metroid 2, thereby making Sega look modern and understanding, and they released Metroid Prime Federation Force. I don't know which is worse, really. Now obviously I'm being facetious, Federation Force is a game that was poorly timed more than anything. It's like bad box art Mega Man in Street Fighter Cross Tekken or the new Devil May Cry Pachinko machine. In a vacuum it's an inoffensive little thing, but in context it's the first thing to come from the series in a long time since something notably controversial, and it's not what people wanted. The game follows the antics of the Prime series take on the Federation at the end of the Prime storyline, while Samus shows up to get captured, brainwashed and forced to fight the Force. And people still defend Nintendo's decision making. Now, onto the series timeframe. According to the first game's remake, Metroid Zero Mission, the Federation was formed in 2003 of the Cosmic Calendar, while the events of the game itself take place in 20x5. Normally you leave the last digit ambiguous to suggest a particular decade, not a specific year within any one of 10 different decades. Why not just say 20XX like Mega Man, honestly? According to the Prime Trilogy art booklet, Prime 1 is set 3 years later, therefore 20x8. Corruption is stated as 6 months after Echoes, and Samus was 3 when her parents died, but that's really all I could find definitively. Federation Force has been stated to be set in 20x6 despite coming after Prime 1, so that's out. The Prime series also introduced a new dating system known as Cycles, which doesn't make any kind of sense. I've seen it suggested that Echoes comes 1 to 2 years after Prime 1, but that's pure conjecture. 2 Super and Other M seem to happen within a fairly short time of one another. I bet they'd say 9 months if they explained it. But really, too little is known to definitively say. As such, I'm unfortunately going to have to ignore specific dates this time around. There was a very good fan attempt at piecing this together from 2007 to 10 on MetroidDatabase.com, where they use a bunch of small details from across the series up to Other M. However, as the creator themselves actually admit, there's a lot of assumption involved in it. Still, it's probably worth a look for long-time fans. Check the description for a link if you're interested. So I'm sorry if this episode isn't as informative or revelatory as previous episodes, but I think this episode should stand as a message to Nintendo to take this series more seriously than a guy who has never finished an entry of the series in his fucking life. So without further ado, the Metroid timeline goes a little something like this. Cosmic Calendar Year 2003. The Galactic Federation is established. Years later, the K2L space colony is attacked by the space pirates under the command of Ridley, leaving the 3-year-old Samus Aran as the sole survivor. Samus is taken in and trained by the Chozo on the planet Zebes. In her late teens, Samus leaves Zebes to join the Federation. The Chozo AI Mother Brain goes rogue and takes command of the attacking space pirates, forcing the Chozo to flee. Samus serves under Adam Malkovich until he saves the passengers of the Lusitania passenger ship at the cost of his brother's life. Samus then leaves the Federation to become a freelance bounty hunter. Years later, the space pirates capture Metroid samples to clone an army of the creatures. The Federation hires Samus to follow the pirates to Zebes and stop their plot. Samus destroys Ridley and Mother Brain, triggering a self-destruct system in the space pirate base which she narrowly escapes. 3 years later, Samus arrives on Talon 4 in pursuit of a revived Ridley. She defeats Ridley and battles the Metroid Prime, the source of the radioactive substance Phazon. The Metroid Prime absorbs Samus' Phazon suit before its death, allowing it to be reborn as Samus' doppelganger, Dark Samus. Sometime later, Samus receives word of the ultimate power in the Alimbic cluster. Samus investigates, pursued by 6 other bounty hunters. They discover the ultimate power to be a creature known as Goria. Samus defeats the other hunters and destroys Goria. Samus is later hired by the Federation to track down a group of missing Marines on the planet Aether. She encounters Dark Samus for the first time and pursues the creature through a portal to an alternate dimension, where she battles a race known as the Ing. Samus destroys the Emperor Ing and destabilizes the alternate version of Aether before escaping to her own dimension. 6 months later, Samus and 3 other bounty hunters are hired to deliver a vaccine for a virus created by the space pirates. Dark Samus attacks the group and infects them with Phazon, leaving Samus comatose. 1 month later, Samus awakens and pursues Dark Samus and the now corrupted bounty hunters. After cleansing herself of the Phazon, Samus battles Dark Samus, now connected to the core of the planet Phase. Dark Samus' death causes Phase to explode, destroying all of the remaining Phazon in the universe. Sometime later, Samus is sent to sabotage the space pirates' Doomsire battleship alongside the newly established Federation force. Samus is captured by the space pirates and brainwashed into fighting the team. After being released from the pirates' control, Samus assists the team in destroying the Master Brain and escaping the ship before the Federation destroys it. Sometime later, the Federation attempts to eliminate the Metroid threat for good. After their squads are all wiped out, Samus is brought in to finish the job. Travelling to SR338, Samus discovers and destroys the Queen Metroid. She then witnesses the hatching of a baby Metroid which imprints onto her. Recalling her own past as a sole survivor, Samus takes the baby Metroid with her as she leaves the planet. Samus takes the Metroid to the Serra space colony for study, where it is stolen by Ridley and taken to Zebes. Samus kills both Ridley and the revived Mother Brain for good, but not before the baby Metroid sacrifices itself to save Samus. Samus narrowly escapes the planet as it's destroyed by a planetary self-destruct system. The event leaves Samus suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder. After receiving medical treatment, Samus picks up a distress call from the Federation's bottle ship, where she finds Adam and his squad investigating the distress call. Adam sacrifices himself to destroy the cloned Metroids on board before a Federation unit arrives to cover up their research and destroy the bottle ship. Samus is later hired to accompany a Federation research team to SR388. There, she becomes infected with an X-parasite and her ship is destroyed. Through surgery and a vaccine, Samus is saved but left fused with parts of her power suit, now dubbed the Fusion Suit. Samus encounters and destroys the Omega Metroid before fleeing the exploding planet in her new ship, leaving the Federation's Metroid research to be destroyed along with the planet. I think it says a lot that Samus Aran, largely a blank slate for 2 decades, has remained such an icon of video games in spite of very little characterization to flesh out her character. Perhaps it's a testament to the little things, like the personality in her animations, the mystique of what makes her tick, or just the unique abilities she has to offer that draws so many people to her. Or maybe it's a tit, but Metroid is a series with a very loyal fan base in spite of how the series has been horribly mishandled for the last decade. Do not squander this, Nintendo. Fans of this series have put up with a lot of shit from you guys, but they're still here, and that kind of loyalty is not easy to come by. If you don't want to continue the series in any meaningful way, fine, that's your choice, but at least give the series and its fans a good send-off. Don't let this story end with a whimper. Let it end with a bang.